Okay, so we're going to backtrack a little bit to the end of Nun Hey Amid Beis at the bottom, so we can continue today. So the main discussion, the focus is Reb Meir's opinion that what the Rabbanon instituted has the same effect as midoraisa. In other words, Gevetlach, I mean, normally we would say, okay, midrabanan we're makel, midoraisa we're machmer. Comes Rab Meir and says no, that the what the Rabbanan themselves said in many instances is just as machmir as doraisa. So that's the position. And now we're going to say, we're going to try to slug that up. So the Gemara is now going to go back and forth on that whole discussion, whether or not that's a valid opinion, or does Reb Meir concede, or whatever. That's going to be where we're going to be heading now. So we're about maybe about 10 lines or so from the bottom of the second letter, Mosav Rav Sheshes. So Rav Sheshes, so there's two Mishnahs, one in Master Sheni and one in Demai, that taken together that we want to say will counter Reb Meir's view, that it'll slug up Reb Meir's view. What are those two? What are those two? So most of Rav Sheshes asked the following question. All right, it says in the Mishnah in Demai, Mechalalosa kesef al kesef, that you can be now this has to do with Demai. Demai meaning sofrik maser. So mechalalosa kesef al kesef, that if you mechalal it, you mean you make it chol, and you make it on a silver coin, you can transfer the from one silver coin to the other. In other words, you can make it kodesh. You take off the chilul, make a kodesh, but you can do it mikesef lekesef, from one coin to another. We'll see why that's yes or no in a minute. Also, nechoshes al nechoshes, you can deconsecrate on nechoshes and then transfer to another nechoshes. Kesef al nechoshes, or kesef to nechoshes, and nechoshes al peiros. And you can also transfer from nechoshes al peiros, which of course raises the question. The whole point here is not to take the peiros, right? We're trying to avoid having to carry a heavy load of peiros, so we're trying to put it onto money. But here, this Mishnah says that you can, with Demai, you can actually transfer from the Choshes al peiros. And then, here's the point, v'yachse v'yiftes al peiros, and then you can be podeh the peiros. So in other words, we have multiple different ways of making, of deconsecrating kodesh from the fruit, onto the coins, which coin, whatever coin. And then the Mishnah says, Divrei Reb Meir. These are the words of Reb Meir. Now, this sounds like a pretty large kula to all of us, right? I mean, Reb Meir is being very liberal here, and he's saying, look at all the different things that you can do to be mechalel for Demai. V'chachamim omrim, and the chachamim go one step further, and they say, Yalu Peres v'yachli b'Yerushalayim, that not only do you have all these kulas, he says, but even you can be machalel onto Paris and take the Paris of Yerushalayim, which normally we say we don't do. So the Chachamim are saying we do it, that you can be machalel, because remember, Reb Meir said that nechoshes ala Paris, and then v'yachne v'yiftes ha Paris. So according to Reb Meir, you can be podeh onto fruit, but then you immediately transfer it from the fruit back onto a coin. We'll see what kind of coin in a minute. But the Chachamim say no, go one step further and say no, you don't even have to do that. You can machalal directly as Master Sheni of Demai, and therefore we don't make another change. So that's the Mishnah in Demai. That's how the Mishnah comes out in Demai. Now, there's a second Mishnah, and this Mishnah is in Maser Sheni, dealing not with Demai, but with regular Maser. Okay. So, mi machalin kesef al nechoshes, do you really, kasha, do you allow to be machalal kesef onto nechoshes, meaning from a sort of higher chashivas? Kesef is higher chashivas than nechoshes. are we allowing to machal from kesef and the choshes? B'hotanan, we learned in the Mishnah, because the Mishnah tells us we're Masa Sheni, Sela shel Masa Sheni, v'shel Chulin shenas Arvu. You had two Salaim, two silver coins. One was of Masa Sheni and one was a Chulin. And they got mixed up and you don't know which is which. So what should you do to sort of clarify here? So it seems very straightforward. Says the Mishnah, maybe Besela Maos, he brings copper coins, right? And he says, Kol makam sheyeshna sela shel masa sheni mecholan al molas halalu. He verbalizes and he says, here is the copper coins, the equivalent of the sela, whichever sela, I don't know which one, but whichever sela is masa sheni, that's the one that I'm transposing the kedusha of the masa sheni onto my copper coins. That's what the Mishnah says, right? And then what? Mecholelas almos halalu, and then the kedusha then falls onto the copper coins. And what does he do? He doesn't leave it with the copper coins because you shouldn't really leave it with that which is least chashivas. So when we transfer from Paris to Sela, Sela is a high level, fine. So it seems that you can, as an interim, like we said before, in Demai, where you could trade from the Choshes into Paris, and then from Paris, you transfer back into a coin. So here, by the Mishnah so that was Demai, but here by Maser Sheni, Macholan al Mos Halalu, then you make it cholol onto the coins, ubore es hayofer shebehen, and then now. Remember, the two Saloim, one was Masa Sheni, one was not. Now they are totally removed from Masa Sheni. They're two really regular coins. And what does he do? Umarid es hayofer shebehen, and he selects the nicer of the two coins. Again, the whole Indian being that what does it mean nice? Because in those days they used coins. I guess maybe the alloy or the metal, whatever, they eroded. I mean, we don't see that as much in our coins, but coins eroded. So the edges became rough. They weren't smooth around. So, but nevertheless, they were in circulation. Only when it was really, really bad. Remember, we had the Gemara that said, is a sela, depending on how much silver it has. So we know that there is that discussion. So what does he do? He He has to pick the nicer of the two coins, of those two sela coins, and machal nalea, and he deconsecrates from the nechoshes onto those coins. All right. So what do we see? We see two Mishnahs, and in both of them we see kulas, right? So in other words, if you were to take the position that Reb Meir seems to have taken, that we attribute to Reb Meir, that we're machmir by D'Rabbanan, just like we are midaraisa from Torah, then why, according to Meir, by Demai, which is midrabanan, it's because midaraisa we say it's considered maser. The rabbis came and they said, you know what? Because you're dealing with an amoritz, maybe he gave, maybe he didn't. So therefore, it's Demai. But if you're going to say that Reb Meir says that we have the same stringency, the same makbid, the same hakbada on D'Rabbanan as D'Oraisa, why would you allow that? So that seems to be the kasha here on Reb Meir. You want to say Reb Meir, that was the muss of Rav Sheshes. You want to say Reb Meir says such and such. That's not the case. It's not such and such. We see that he is Mekel. So that's what we got to last week. But this is, again, understanding that we're focusing on Reb Meir's position and how he goes about being makbid and saying that you have to have. Okay, so now having said that, so the chayra, there's another kasha. I mean, we'll digress a minute and we'll ask another kasha. Why do we go through all these manipulations to take it and remove it from the kesef to the nechoshesh, to the choshesh back to the kesef? It seems like it's like a shell game. You know, we have to undo and do. Why don't we just do what the Mishnah said in Master Sheni is you announce and you say, I'm removing the Kedusha from one and to the other. Then you won't have to go and dip down to Nechoshes and then dip back up into Kesef. If you make the pronouncement, which clearly the Mishnah says you can do, I am deconsecrating this, so whichever one of the silver coins was Master Sheni, I'm deconsecrating onto another coin. Fine, that's good. So why do we have to go into this up and down situation when we can be very straightforward and say that very simply we take the kedusha and move it from one to the other without having to go into all of this. So this is what the Gemara says. Why do we have this process? Mipnei Amru, because the Rabbanan said, yeah.
Why would you think that the fact that there's a question of which coin has the kedusha on it, why will they let you just blanket say there's two of them together in my hand, whichever one is the real one, that's the one I want to have?
No, but the Mishnah Master Sheni says that the rabbis agreed to that. In other words, this became the sort of the halacha of this became the law of the land, is that you can do that. You can actually verbalize. Look, we verbalize a lot of our mitzvahs too. I mean, we say we make brachas, of course, and then we say this is dedicated to the Beis HaMikdash. This isn't. So we have to verbalize it. You don't necessarily have to anoint it with oil or do something, manifest. You can actually say such and such is what I'm doing. But if you can do that, if you can say, I have two seller, I don't know which one. So I want to make sure that I've got the right one. So I take it out from one to the other. But why go into this whole thing of Nechoshes and then Kesef and back and forth when you can just say it right out and move it from point one to point two without going through the manipulations? That's really what the Gemara wants to understand is, okay, I understand you can verbalize, but why go through the up and down of it? Why not just say, I'm taking it from one, putting it in the other and finished. That's it. So that's really the underlying question is, what's the seichel here?
How would that appear to other halachas that you're so unsure that you can just, in your mind, you say, I'm moving it and I don't know which one it is. Wouldn't that affect all kinds of other halachas?
Well, again, we see that by Master Sheni, I mean, we see that you can redeem things, sometimes with a chomesh or not is the question here, but you can redeem things by just saying, I'm moving it from point A to point B. Why shouldn't you be able to do that with chilul too? If you deconsecrate fruit, and you say, I'm putting it on this money, and that's what I'm taking Yerushalayim, haven't you in fact just what have you done? You've taken Kodesh, and by saying so, just on your say so, you've moved it into something else that becomes Kodesh, and the fruit becomes chol.
There's no ambiguity in that case because the fruit
Understood. There's no ambiguity. You're asking why, when there's an ambiguity, can you do it? And that's really the chiddush of the Tana in Maser Sheni, and saying not only can you do it stamazoi, but you can do it when there's a suffix, which one it is. We're going to allow you to do the same procedure and say, I don't know what the alternative would be. When you think about it, what will the alternative be if we're saying that you can speak out things and move from Kodesh to Chol and such, then you should be able to do it even when there's a suffix of which is Kodesh, right? It is a question of Kodesh. It's just a question of suffix Kodesh. So we're saying that the Mishnah says you should be able to do the same thing, just move it from point A to point B. And why do you have to have the ups and downs that our mission describes with Kesef, the Choshes, Paris, back and forth? Just go straight.
You're amplifying the ambiguity when you start going through these other things.
Exactly right. That's even a better point. So why amplify the ambiguity? Just slip from point A to point B, which we know you can do in many other mitzvahs, and let's just do it. So it's interesting that the Gemara, so he says, no, there's a little bit of a different lashon. The Mishnah doesn't mean just mechalin. Mechalin also kesef al nachoshes bedochek. The word bedochek means in extreme circumstance. So in other words, what the Mishnah there is really saying is that you can be mechalel from kesef. See the whole question. Okay, so why is this a question? It's a question because we're being maridin bekodesh, right? That was really the question, because we're going from kesef to nechoshes, going downward in kedusha. So if we're going downward in kedusha, why should we allow that? That was the premise of the question. Why does he need to just speak it out and move it from laterally from point? That's really the question. So the Gemara now says mechal also kesef al nechoshes. You know when you can be mechal kesef nechoshes? Not in every circumstance. Bedochek, only in difficult circumstance, right? Lo sheyakayim kain, and again, the purpose is not to lower the standard from kesef to nechoshes. Ela shechozer mechalel nasa kesef. So right away, the Gemara tells us this is not the norm. In other words, in the norm, if you can transfer from point A to point B, that's actually what we should do. We should transfer from point A to point B. But in a place where b'doichik we can't, then here is what you do. You deconsecrate it to a lower level, and then chozer mechalel nasa kesef, and you can mechal then back to silver coins, right? So therefore, we have to do it in that fashion. Now, why is that? Why is it? What's the doichik? So we have to understand that there's really a machlokes. It's really unclear whether or not, when it says that by Masa Sheni, for instance, what are we doing? We're taking it from Paris and putting it on fruit. We're taking it from one kind of object to another kind of object. That we understand. But to take it from one object to the same object, there's no basis of that in the Torah. So if you're going to say, I'm going to deconsecrate it to silver, and then from silver to silver, how do you have a right to say that? The Torah doesn't say that you can take something from one chayfetz to the same chayfetz. It has to be different. It has to be Paris to fruit. Or in this case, kesef to nechoshes. Says the Gemara, that's why we do it. We go from kesef to nechoshes, so they shouldn't be identical items. They shouldn't be identical tangibles. Then we immediately take the nechoshes and put it back to kesef. But we need that interim in order to be able to break the chain and not say, oh, it's kesef al kesef, and therefore it's not appropriate. So that's the chiddush of the Gemara, why we have to dip down. Now, if we found a different metal that was mechoshev than nechoshes, but not quite kesef, it doesn't preclude it. It just, it was either copper or silver. Those were the two. Silver is better. Silver is more choshev, and silver is what you should actually bring to Yerushalayim, and then change the silver into fruit to the Beis Hamikdash for Maser Sheni, whatever it happens to be. In other words, if you're giving Maser if you're giving Truma or Maser or Trumas Maser, all these other things all fall into that category. So, but here we have no choice, because we have to go in that direction in order to take a step back to go forward. That's what he means. But Bedochek, when you're pressed and you don't have an alternative, that's what the Mishnah means. Then you can do that. Okay.
But would diamonds have been considered acceptable?
I don't think that. I mean, from what we had learned in the Gemara past, it was coins. It was diamonds was not really used as a means of exchange. Like we went to the store. So I mean, maybe
the problem with diamonds, it's the same thing even today with a wedding ring has to be just metal.
What's the value?
Because a gem may be very, very valuable, but you can't determine an accurate value easily.
That's right, because it's inaccurate value, so you can't say this is a kesef had it was the government said, yeah, this coin is worth, a sela is worth such.
And even if it's subject to market conditions, you Google it and you see, this is an ounce of
today's the
silver
market
worth
value, right?
Such amount.
Yeah, but you're right. It is too ambiguous when it comes to stones or any other kinds of precious gems. So therefore, that wasn't the modus of transferring value. In any event, so that's okay. So now we have we understand why we do that, right? So now So now we're going to go back to Reb Meir. Reb Meir is the one who said that.
With diamonds, you can certainly exchange it for coins, and you can have the same question. Why can't he take small industrial diamonds and convert it into coins, and then go to Yerushalayim with the coins?
Well, again, I think it's the valuation. How do you figure out the value in a chomesh? In other words, if you're going to have to give a chomesh for being mechalal your own produce, how are you going to do that when you have sort of an ambiguous value? You know, if you said everybody's agreed, and again, there's a different kind of diamonds. A diamond is worth 10 sloim. An example. Then we could say, okay, fine, a diamond's worth 10 sloim. You can go ahead and make the exchange and give a chomesh, but it is sort of really sort of undefined as to what the value is, and that's the real problem.
Today it gets defined by somebody who weighs it and looks at the purity of
Yeah,
the diamond.
but you're talking about the hamonam. I mean, yeah, maybe those people who are in the profession will know, but someone who's a farmer and he goes ahead and he harvests his produce. Now he wants to give Masasheni, he wants to give all these different things. What's he going to do? I mean, how is he going to value that and say, okay, this value is such and such, and therefore I'll give this amount. It becomes complicated, Jay. I think this is why Chazal said, let's just use those things that are very objective in value and make it easy for everybody, especially for the Hamonam who don't have access, let's say, to to diamonds or other stones or things of that nature. So in any event, having said. So now we understand why we have to go through that process. Is because we have a problem with transferring from the same chayfetz to the same chayfetz. That's not appropriate. So now we're going to go back to Reb Meir. So Reb Meir says that we midrabanan, whereas machmer is deraisa, kotani mias. Okay, so now we have this Mishnah that we just said, machalim bedochek, that you can machalel onto these copper coins bedochek, right? In other words, in a circumstance where it's pressing, you can do it. But we extrapolate from that shalom dochek. But when you don't have a dochek, when there's no pressing need, then it's not permitted, right? So if it's not permitted, right, then we're back to the question. Okay, so it's only bedoichik, not when it's not bedoichik, right? The Mishnah that we said before about Maser Sheni of Demai said you can it said that you can deconsecrate coins and made no chiluk between dochik and not dochik, right? The Mishnah Demai didn't talk about dochik, so we see that when by regular Maser Sheni, there's a difference between dochik and lo dochik. By demai, which is midrabanan, there's no chiluk. So once again, the kasha on Reb Meir. Reb Meir wants to say that midrabanan, we are as stringent as makbid as we are midaraisa. You see, that's not the case because this whole concept of dochik only works on a deraisa. It only works on Maser Sheni. Maser Sheni, if it's dochek, fine. If it's not dochek, no. But demai, even when it is dochek, it doesn't matter. So you see that according the rabbis were not as makbid in demai, meaning by rabbinic isser. So it's back to the same kasha on Reb Meir. Reb Meir wants to take the position that it's more the Rabbanan are as stringent as the Raisa. We see from this Mishnah that's not the case. We said it before. Then we wanted to reinterpret the Mishnah to say it's talking about dochek, and the kasha is even with dochek, the same kasha appears on Reb Meir because we see that in a rabbinic circumstance by Demai that there is no chilik between dochek and not dochek. Both cases you can freely transfer. So that's the kasha on Reb Meir. Again, the Gemara is trying to shake the tree here and see what Reb Meir says and whether or not we can sort of get out from under his halacha. Comes Rabbi Yosef. Okay, so now Omer Rabbi Yosef says Rabbi Yosef, Afal Pisha Mikabel Rab Meir Bipidiono. So here's how we're going to slice the pie and find that we can really that the Rab Meir will agree in some circumstance. What does Rabbi Yosef say? There's a chilik between pidyon, redeeming, and achila, and eating. Afal pisha kibel Rab Meir b'pidyono, even though Rab Meir says by pidyon we're going to be not as makmid midrabanan, because we're talking about redemption, right? This whole parsha that we're talking about, Masasheni Demai, it's all about redemption. We're redeeming the food, and we're saying that we're redeeming it with another coin. That Reb Meir says, Reb Yosef Reb Meir will agree. The Rabbanan are lenient on that when it comes to pigeon. We're not makbid. When are we makbid? Machmehu ba'achiloso. But when it comes to eating, when it comes to consuming the item, then we're much more makbid, and we say that midrabanan we hold the same chumras as midoraisa. So that's how Rabbi Yosef wants to reinterpret the machloikis in Rab Meir and say all these mishnahs, by the way, are very strong. So it's going to be very hard to distinguish and find. Rab Meir says that you can. That the Rabbanan are as stringent as the Torah. So Rabbi Yosef then backs in and says, you know what? I'll agree. When it comes to pigeon, Rabbi Meir is also very lenient. But when it comes to achila, and now you want to eat the fruit, then the Rabbanan are just as makbid as the Araisa. Okay, so. So that's how the Gemara is going to interpret it. Now, let's take a look.
This is the food that you buy in Yerushalayim, right?
The food that you're buying in Yerushalayim, yeah, the parrots that you're buying in Yerushalayim, there is a greater hakpada that midrabanan. Again, I don't know what the rabbanan would be there because the Torah is saying Maser Sheni, but assuming that there's any rabbanan, any rabbinic stringency, then it's just as stringent as would be midaraisa. Okay, so
what kind of example could that be?
Okay, so so for instance, I'm going to look at Rashi in a minute. When you have a non-kohen, right, who eats maser of demai, a non-kohen who eats maser of demai, then we're going to say that the chumrah midrabanan is the same as the raisa. It's the same category of chumrah because he's going to consume it. Remember, we're talking about redemption here in these mishnahs. We're redeeming it. So redeeming it, it seems like you can be sort of not as stringent. You can make those redemptions and not say, oh no, you're not allowed to. But when, let's say, someone who's not a kohen eats truma, now he's consuming it, and if it's right, and if it's demai, so what do you do? So there, Reb Meir says no. There, I have to keep my stringency. I have to keep my chomor and the chumrah, and I have to say that it has the same. It's just the same as the raisa. So that's how we're going to resolve. At least for now, we're not finished, but at least for now, that's how we're going to resolve the chiluk between in Reb Meir, the difference between pigeon and all right. So so the Rashi here on top of Nun Vav Amud Aleph, Mepnei She'omru Klomar Lefikach Hiskiku L'Chol Eile L'Chal Lo Tchila B'Mos. That's why we were mechazik with regard to Chilo B'Mos. We're mechazik first with Mos. V'chozer Mechal Hamos he's explaining what we just said before, why we go through this process. And we don't say, like we said in the previous Mishnah, let him just take the nicer of the coins, and like, right, when we had the two coins, we said, oh, no problem, let it just deconsecrate it on the nicer of the silver coins. We don't say that because we need to go into this process. Imzu shel maser haritov, imzeh shel chulin, harizeh shel maser mechaleles alzu. Mipnei she'omru mechalelin kesef al nechoshes midochek. Because we introduced this whole concept of dochek, therefore we say aval kesef al kesef lav derech chilul. This is what we said. Kesef al kesef is not the normal way to be mechalel, because it's the same category. It's kesef. So you can't remember, we're always looking to exchange one for a different type of item. So you can't exchange it within its own sphere. Kesef al kesef, right? Lav derech chilulhu va'afilu midoichik nami lo. So even bedoichek, we don't allow an exchange of kesef al kesef, because when the Torah said that you make a pigeon, the pigeon had to be from one chayfetz to a different type of chayfetz. So even bedochek, there's no such thing as dochek. If the Torah says you can't do it, then you can say, oh no, in a certain circumstance, I'm gonna allow to do it. So we see that this is a very big stringency when it comes to exchanging kesef al kesef. Lav derech chilulhu va'afilu medochik nami. No, the given the af kesef on the choshes lohutiru ela bedochek, and since this moving it from kesef to copper is only in extreme circumstances, hilkach lo shiakayim kain, it can't sort of exist, it can't end that way, right? It should be bezoyin masahu, because that's a bezoyin masa that you're going to now dip from fruit all the way down to nechoshes. V'od shahaprutas machlidos. We had this earlier, that copper coins seem to decompose more quickly than silver. So if you're going to allow it to remain with silver, with copper, again, you're going to take the copper up to Yerushalayim. At least the Gemara is suggesting, if he has a very, very long trip, maybe by the time he gets there, the copper coins are already, not so strong, because they're softer, or they don't have the same consistency. So for a variety of reasons, either because of chashivus or because the coins themselves aren't sturdy coins, we don't want to allow it to remain in copper. Therefore, we say you have to then take it from copper and bring it back up to silver. Okay, so that we understand how this process works. And at the end of the day, he should be going to Yerushalayim with the nicest with the silver coin. And we see from the Mishnah in Maser Sheni that not only silver, but the nicest silver. He should pick the nicest silver coin and not go with one that seems to have its own little issues of erosion or whatever the case may be. All right. So Katani Mias, who brought this raya, got Maser. By Maser, Vadai Medochek in Shalom Medochek Lo. So by Maser, we say Dochek in Lo Medochek Lo. We given the Amar Kesef al Nechoshes Medochek in Shalom Medochek Lo. We got B'damai Tana Mechalin Amal Rab Meir Lo Osabor Chizuk. So we see that by regular Maser we have this either or. It's either by Dochek yes, by no Dochek no. But by Midrabanan we don't make that chiluk between dochek and not dochek. So that shows that Reb Meir would say that by Rabbanan, you're not as makbid, you're not as machmir as you are deraisa. This is the whole point, is we're trying to see how Reb Meir comes out on the lenient issues, whether or not he says on what's potentially lenient has the same chumrah as deraisa. So anyway, so we were kind of stuck. Came Rabbi Yosef, and he gave us a good answer, right? That by pigeon, no, Rabbi Meir is more lenient when it comes to pigeon, but when it comes to achila, where you really have you transgress. By pigeon, you're not really committing anything improper if you make that kind of exchange. But by achila, a non-kohen who eats truma, there's a serious offense here. Shamachmeh be'achiloso shel maser sheni shel demai, right? U'master betchila koi. So therefore, in when it came to eating demai, which is midrabanan, Rab Meir does say, no, I'm as machmer as I am for a biblical iser. So that's how the Gemara here wants to sort of come to this conclusion. And okay, so but now the Gemara goes on to say we're going to bring a raya to this. So we're going to bring a raya to Rabbi Yosef. Well, how? The Tanya, because we learned in the Brisa tells us, the Brisa says, Lohitiru limkur demai. This is a very interesting concept. You're not matter to sell demai on the market, ela lasitom bilvad. Only if you are a wholesaler, meaning that you sell in bulk. Therefore, when you sell in bulk, it's the concept that everybody knows that you're going to have potentially no, not you didn't give maser. No one's going to be confused. In other words, if everybody knows that when you go to a wholesaler, it's not tithed, then we don't have a problem, because you can sell something that is not tithed as long as everybody knows it. There isn't an isser in selling demai, no isser, but everybody has to know it. Says that brisa that when you're going to a wholesaler, then no problem. Everybody knows it. Ubalabayis, but a balabayis here, it means a private person or a retailer, meaning not a wholesaler. Benkach ubenkach tzorech la'aser. So he says that for a retailer, if a retailer should want to sell wholesale, yeah, it's considered then he can't do that. In other words, the law is that we have to be machmir.
They won't let him become a wholesaler?
In other words, yeah. So let's say a retailer has a lot of food and he says, okay, I'm going to sell wholesale. Okay, so there he has to give maser because people will be confused. So now, we're talking about people. Okay, the farmers, the amoritz, not the seller. Okay, the sellers are not considered amoratzim. So if a wholesaler sells, then we say, you know what? We don't. His produce could come from an amoritz, from who, from where, we don't know. Therefore, everything is considered demai, and you have to give maser. But a balabayas, who is we use the term choshev. In other words, he's knowledgeable. He's a ben Torah. He knows. You're going to say, oh, you know what? If he sells wholesale, he doesn't have to give maser. Says the Gemara, no, because he has the imprimatur of a retailer, a balabayas, he is already. It's known that he would give maser. Therefore, even if he turns around and sells wholesale, he still has to give maser because people will be confused and won't know that he didn't give maser. So that's how the Gemara.
They would assume that he gave maser. If he goes and he puts up a sign wholesale, then the public is going to assume that he did it.
No. So you have two. You have a wholesaler and a retailer. You go to once in a while the retailers go to the wholesalers. Once in a while, a private person will go to a wholesaler, but they know from the wholesaler it's demai. I have no doubt that I have to give maser. Okay,
Right.
Okay. Now the retailer starts cutting it up, and he now wants to sell. Now you realize that selling wholesale and retail is a whole different Indian, because the retailer is selling differently from a profit than a wholesaler. A wholesaler sells in bulk, he can sell at a lower price because he's making it up in volume. The retailer isn't making it up in volume, he has to sell at a higher price. So says the Gemara that retailer, if he all of a sudden wants to switch and say, okay, for this sale, I'm a wholesaler, sorry, you have to give maser, because now you have the imprimatur of a retailer, and you could no longer say, I'm a wholesaler here. I want to be a wholesaler. You can't say that. So therefore, says the Gemara, okay, now we understand why Well, there is that chiluk. So that's the
But he's
that's
obligated to tell the public that he has done something or hasn't done something related to the product that he's trying to sell.
right. No, so
He has to inform everybody. The retailer who deals with the public has to inform the public what the situation is.
but right, right. But in order to make sure that no one is over the lav, he has to do it anyway. In other words, we're not saying that the retailer can now publicize and say, "Oh, I'm a wholesaler here. Now you have to give your own maser."
You have to
You
do it yourself.
automatically has to give maser so as not to confuse the public and say that, "Oh, now I wear a different hat, so you have to treat this food differently." That we won't allow. Who says that? Divrei Rab Meir. In this brisa, Rab Meir is the one who says that there's a chiluk between a wholesaler and a retailer. Chachamim omrim, the Chachamim say, echad hasiton, echad balabayis, moche v'shalech l'chavera v'nosen lo b'matana, ve'ena choshesh. That come the Chachamim and say, no, it doesn't matter whether he's a siton, meaning a wholesaler, or a balabayis, or a retailer, right? Mocher v'shalech l'chavera, he can sell or give to his friend b'matana. Ve'ena choshesh, and we're not afraid, we're not concerned that the one who's getting it, who's buying it or getting it from matana, will eat the mai, right? So now,
How does that work again? Why aren't we concerned with if somebody says I'm a wholesaler all of a sudden?
No. So, this is the Chachamim now. The Chachamim say, Reb Meir said there's a chiluk between a wholesaler and a retailer. The Chachamim came and said, Echad hasiton ve'echad balabayis. Doesn't matter if you're a wholesaler or a retailer. You can sell or give b'matana ve'ena choshesh, and we're not worried that it won't be a maser, because according to the Chachamim, everything has to be tithed. Everything has to be tithed, right? So
You can't sell anything
you
without.
can't sell anything without giving a tithe, right? So now, what do we see from this brisa? We see that according to Rab Meir, eating demai, he treats it very, 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 very chumrah. He teaches chumrah because he's saying that balabayis, you automatically always have to give a maser. So the Chum say Eina Choshesh, I'm not worried. The Rebbeir says I am worried. Why am I worried? Because by demai, which is midrabanan, I have the same chumrah as I have midaraisa by maser. So once again, here we wanted to, and remember, we're talking about redemption here. So sorry, we're talking about achila. We're talking about achila because he's going to eat this maser. So this is consistent with the proof that we said before in Rabbi Yosef, that there's a chiluk between redemption and eating, and that with redemption, Reb Meir is mekel, and with eating, he is machmir. And we see from this brisa, which talks about eating, that he's machmir, and he says that by the retailer, you automatically have to always give. You have to give maser, because otherwise we're going to be choshesh. Now, there's another factor in the wholesale retail discussion, and which we're going to see also in Rashi, is that the second reason why there's a chiluk between a retailer and a wholesaler is because when the wholesaler sells, he's not makbid, since he's selling on volume, he'll throw in something extra. And that extra is what the person is going to take off as maser. In other words, if a person is going to buy $100 worth of produce, the wholesaler will sell them 110 say pounds or whatever it is worth of produce, so that he can give the maser and still wind up paying for the 100 that he's paying. In other words, he's not going to take the loss.
Right.
By the retailer, since the retailer is more makbid on volume, because he's not going to be so generous and say, "Oh, I'm selling you, a bushel, but I'll give you a bushel and a quarter or something. He won't do that because that's a loss of money to him because he works on a much smaller margin. And so he has to be more makbid on what he sells. Therefore, that's why that's another reason why the Gemara says that Babala Bayis, you have to give maser, always have to give maser, is because you're never giving the buyer a little bit extra to take off the maser and still buy what he's buying. You see, the cheshbon of the Chachamim is so exact, is that we don't want to cheat somebody. Someone's going to buy $100 worth and get $100 worth. Now he has to give maser. Then at the end he's going to wind up with 90. But he didn't bargain for that. He bargained for 100. That's why we say that the wholesalers are more generous in throwing in extra produce, and therefore, since they're selling demai, the buyer knows that he can be give maser and still wind up with the same net that he would with the retailer. That's a different cheshbon, and as another reason why we allow that. Okay, let's take a look at Rashi.
You also have the fact that when he's come up to Yerushalayim,
Yeah,
trying to buy food, he has choices of which seller to buy from, and some may advertise that they've taken off the miser, and others may advertise, "I'll give you a little bit extra, and you do it." So it's a funny kind of market.
yeah, but by the time you get to Yerushalayim, though, you're not really. It isn't a wholesale situation. By the time you get to Yerushalayim, I think you're really only. In other words, we're talking about the phase when you're still in Chutz Yerushalayim and you want to because remember, the whole point of this is to deconsecrate the coins so that what you're leaving over, the fruit that you're leaving over in Chutz Yerushalayim, is edible, right? You don't want to leave over fruit that you didn't give masa to and leave it to leave it to people who are in Chutz Yerushalayim and they may be buying untied fruit. That's
Right.
really what our major concern is. Once you get to Yerushalayim, there's no such thing as untied. I mean, it's all tithed. It's all done already. So you can buy the fruit and eat it.
So the wholesale we're talking about here is at the farmer's neighborhood, not after the trip up to Yerushalayim.
That's correct. You're farm in the neighborhood, right? You want to make sure by the time you have finished this whole procedure and you're on your way to Yerushalayim, that everything you left over is 100% kosher, that there isn't an ambiguity. Did somebody... So we say that if the wholesaler bought it, everybody's going to know that it was not tithed, and since he gives extra food, there's no problem. If it's a retailer, everybody's going to know that he's a retailer and he already gave maser, and therefore when you buy it, you can automatically eat it. That's how they instituted the process, so that in Chutz Yerushalayim, everybody was taken care of. And now when he's going with the money to Yerushalayim, he can now transact in Yerushalayim, and everything there is for sure given maser. There's no such thing as he didn't give maser, because in Yerushalayim, obviously they're more makbid. So therefore, he can do that and not have a problem. Okay, so let's look at Rashi. Rashi says, Lohitiru limkor demai, lohitiru lechaver. In other words, a retailer is called a chaver. A chaver is someone who's choshev, who's a ben Torah. That's a sort of a title that they give to a ben Torah, as opposed to Amoritz, he's a chaver. So lohitiru lechaver halokeach demai shibkirenu lacher ma'ashiaser. A chaver, meaning a retailer, once he buys demai, he must tithe it, and so that there should be no ambiguity that someone else is going to eat it, right? Ella lesitan bovaj, sitan chaver, a sitan chaver, meaning a retailer who's a chaver, lo etzricha la'aser, ela mochro kishehu demai. And we're talking. Remember, the whole thing of Amoritz is really for the farmers, not so much for the businessmen. So the sitan is also a chaver. He's also a Talmud Chacham. Right? Lo hitzricha la'aser ela mochro, he just sells it kishu demai, right? Halakho mimenu, and whoever buys it, yafresh min rasav, shahakol yodim, everybody knows shahasiton Shahasiton, Shahasiton. The Siton, he doesn't buy from just one Amoritz. He goes from farmer to farmer, from land to land. Any one of those farmers could have been untied. Maybe some did, maybe some didn't, right? Nimne Gasehu, the Darka Liknos Peros, Merovin, right? Umochin Lechenvenim. Because they would go around, the wholesalers would be the ones who would go out into the fields, collect the fruit from the different farmers, pay the farmers, come back to the city, and then sell it to the retailer. That was the hierarchy. The retailer didn't go out to collect from the farmers. So therefore, everybody knows that this Siton, who is he's a Talmud Chacham, he's a fine fellow, he didn't give Masa. Now, remember, it's Demai, it may have been Gemaser. So but we don't know if it's actually Tevel or whether it's Demai, because he's going from farmer to farmer and he doesn't know what the farmer did. We're going to assume the farmer didn't, but maybe he did, right? Ubalabayis, the retailer, Alokeach Ma'am Aretz. Then we say, I don't know if is this Russian. Okay, that goes really, I think, to the next thing. All right. So where we are now is that we've gone through this discussion again with Reb Meir. We understand Reb Meir's position. Rabbi Yosef came to tell us that Reb Meir has a different approach for pidyon as he does for achila, and they brought a brisa that shows that by wholesalers and retailers, he's machmir an achila, which is proof positive to Rabbi Yosef's position that by achila he's machmir rabbanan just like the Raisa, but by pidyon he's not machmir, and therefore there is no distinction between him and the chachamim. Okay, so Mitchell, next week we'll pick up because now the Gemara is going to slug up Rabbi Yosef and say Rabbi Yosef. That's why I said it isn't the final word. Rabbi Yosef wanted to tell us, oh, it's easy in Reb Meir between pidyon and achila. Now the Gemara is going to tell us, and this hopefully we'll go through this next week and finish. Is that that it's not so simple. That even Rabbi Yosef's view has objections. So. All right, so we'll stop here, Mitzvah Shem, and everyone should have a very easy fast and a choshev fast. Yom Kippur should be mechaper for all of us. We should have the kapara that we need from the Rebbeinu Shalom. We see Nisim Gluyim every day from the Rebbeinu Shalom. There's no such thing as a heretic, and they say in the foxhole. These are the foxholes that we're in, and there's no atheist. Everybody understands the greatness of the Rebbeinu Shalom. And taka for all of us who are b'nei Maiminim, the kapara should come quickly, and we should be zeicha taka to the Gula Shlema.
Amen.
Amen.
Today's washing.